welcome back to the Introduction to Mock Trial video series, or welcome if this is the first video you're watching in our series. I am Danielle Wilmot, the Mock Trial Program Coordinator for the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education. And I have my email address on the screen, so you have that for reference should you have any questions about the presentation or anything else mock trial related. I'm your person, happy to answer any questions or catch you up on anything you might have missed out on. So today's presentation is going to be about the high school mock trial program, specifically looking at the case packet and the logistics of the program. So we're going to start with just an overview of what the case packet is and what it includes. This really is the guiding document for everything related to the high school mock trial program. And if you already have it, you'll know how long it is. And if you don't, it is a pretty thick document, but that's because it has truly everything you will need. It has rules, it has a whole bunch of stuff. So let's dive into what it looks like. The first half of your case packet really does address mostly administrative items. So it has a list of things like your important dates and the rules and all of that. Then the second half of the packet is really the case itself. So that's your witness statements and your briefs and everything. So the administrative side that I talked about, which is mostly the first half of the document, this is going to have, like I mentioned, the very first thing is a list of important dates because there's a lot of things to keep track of. So we found that it's just easiest to include all of those dates on one page. So you have it right up front and you can reference that throughout the program season. So we start with a list of important dates. We move on to your table of contents because it is a really long document. It's helpful to have reference pages of where you can go for certain witnesses or where the rules are and things of that nature. So guiding principles are up front in the first few pages, very helpful. We have any special notes if that applies. We don't always. Certain things like we did a case on the Second Amendment, and we recognize that that can be a bit of a charged topic when you discuss that with your students. So we just have a note on some resources that you can use to work through that. That was one of our case files. So that's where we will include anything like that. If you need to know some information or have resources prior to really getting into the case, we'll include that up front. That's not always there. It just depends on if the case necessitates that or not. We have a list of competition terms up front. So we try to define anything that might be either different from how you would normally use that word or a word that is specific to mock trial, things like doubling versus splitting when it comes to a team. So all of that language is important because we include it in our rules and throughout the case file. So do be sure to just glance over the competition terms before reading into the rest of the case file so you know exactly what we mean when we use a specific word. We also always have a case introduction, which is just a short 1 page usually or 1.5 page overview of what the case is about. So it talks about the really quick facts and then what the legal argument is and anything like that. So just gives you an overview so you know what you're getting into before reading the rest of the case. We also have a rule section. So this is really the big part of the administrative section of your case file. So there are several different sections of rules, all of which govern your participation in the program. We start with the competition rules, which doesn't talk about anything in terms of the actual case presentation, but it talks about things like how the district competition is structured, how regionals are structured, when and how we announce where your teams will compete, and all of those things that are related to the actual competition itself. We have a whole section on competition rules, and those govern all aspects of the program. So it's really important that you and your students familiarize yourself with all of the rules, including the competition rules, because it talks about any forms or any required elements in order to compete. So we have that as the first section of rules. We then go into procedural rules, which is a continuation of that, in terms of how you know to proceed with the program. So when districts take place, you need these documents completed, etc. So the competition rules and procedural rules really do kind of intertwine, but it it was important enough to break them out so you can read them in a logical way and not get totally overwhelmed because it's a lot of information. And then this next section is really important for the students to understand. It's important for everyone, but this is what students will be using anytime they make an objection or know how to proceed with a certain part of the trial. So this next section is called the Simplified Rules of Evidence. So we base that on the real world rules of evidence, but we've simplified them because that it fills book after book, and we know that the students, one, don't need every single rule that's out there, and two, won't have time to read and digest and actually understand those. So we do simplify those rules a little bit and make it so it's actually usable during a mock trial. So that's super important, because if they want to object to a behavior or something that opposing counsel does, they should have to cite that rule. So knowing them really well allows them to make effective objections and allows them to be the best advocate and witness involved in the trial. So very, very important. And to help understand those rules, we have an entire section on examples. So we give you the simplified rules of evidence and common examples of what that might look like in a trial. So it can be a little overwhelming to read those simplified rules of evidence all the way through, but it is helpful because we have a whole example section. So if you have a question on it, try checking the examples first and see if that's explained. You can always reach out to me for any questions, but generally speaking, the answers can be found in the case file in one of the rule sections. After you get through the rules, there's competition forms, which we have all of these available virtually as well. We just wanted to make sure that we had them in the case file, whether you have a hard copy or a digital copy, because it just streamlines the process and lets you know that you can find it all in the same place. So should there be a scoring error when you get your score sheet back, you notice that somebody did the math wrong and we didn't catch it, you want to fill out a form to let us know that there was a scoring error so we can review the score sheets and proceed. And that's the formal process to notify auxiliary if there was an error. The same thing, there's a complaint form. So if something happens during your trial that is problematic or a violation of rules or anything like that, you have to complete a formal complaint form and then submit that to me. That's the manner in which you get those to auxiliary. And all of that's explained on the form directly. But the important thing to know about those scoring error and complaint forms, they must be completed by an advisor. Students are not permitted to send those to me. Just that helps streamline the process because we have so many students involved. It's much more efficient to have the teacher advisor complete one of those forms and submit them. So that's something to keep in mind. And then every year we have an award that we present to one mock trial coach for their excellence in coaching and their commitment to the program and their commitment to their students. So that form is also included in that section. And what I want to say before I get into this next, the actual case itself, we will have a separate session on previewing the case and organization, but it's important to know that the way we include information in the case packet, so everything in the case itself, is included because it's logical to put it in a document that way, but it does not necessarily mean that's how you should work through the case. So you don't have to read this case packet cover to cover. It really makes sense, even though we have briefs before witness statements, it really makes the most sense to work with witness statement first and get your students to know the facts of the case. There's a fact summary in there and witness statements, and those are more helpful to read through before getting to the legal arguments that you find in the briefs, but it's not going to appear the logical way in the case file because how you read it and how you practice and work with it are two different things. And there will be a separate video that discusses how you as a teacher should approach the case file and then how you should have your students approach the case file. So do stay tuned for that because it's really important. Going on, the general elements of the case file that are included in this packet begins with the judge's order, which just sets the stage of the case. What's going on? Is this a motion hearing? Is this a civil case? That kind of thing. So that's just a quick blurb that sets the stage. Then there are 2 legal briefs, one for each side. So prosecution or plaintiff will have a brief, defense will have a brief. And those briefs are really just to outline the legal arguments in this case. So it helps students understand what they are, and it helps give them some guidance as to how they should build their trial theory, and they should build their arguments throughout the trial presentation. So it's given to assist students in understanding the legal arguments in the case. After the briefs, you'll see the witness statements. And there are 3 statements for each side. So 3 for the prosecution, or if it's civil, plaintiff, and then 3 for defense. It's important to know that students will only present 2 of those witnesses, but we give you all 3, and then it's up to your team to strategize and decide which 2 out of those 3 you intend to call during trial. So the witness statements have that person's point of view and perspective on events and information that only that person might have. So it's really important to get into the witness statements and embody who is this case about, who knows what, and that kind of thing. Again, we'll have another video that will explain what that looks like a little bit more in depth of how do you organize this, but just know that's what the case packet consists of. After witness statements, we have exhibits. So there's no set number of exhibits. It could be 3, it could be 5. One year we had 10. It just depends on the case, what necessitates an exhibit. So sometimes it's something relating to if it's a murder, say, then it might be elements that were collected from the scene of the crime. If it's something else, it might have a map. It could be any number of things. So just make sure you leaf through the exhibits, and then your students can figure out how they want to incorporate that in their trial presentation. After exhibits, we give the legal statute and the case law. So that's where, if it's about a specific constitutional amendment or a specific criminal rule or anything like that, we give you the actual language of the amendment or the rule. And then case law is any of the Supreme Court or federal cases that relate to the topic we're talking about. So if it's, say, a Fourth Amendment case on search and seizure, we'll give you specific cases that relate to that. So anything about like helicopters flying over and using surveillance equipment, there's Supreme Court cases on that. So that would be considered case law. So that is a big chunk of your case. We do redact the cases to make it, 1, relevant, and 2, digestible for your students, because rarely is a Supreme Court case or a federal court case useful when you read it cover to cover with the opinions and the dissents. So we really make sure we comb through it and pull out the relevant and useful information, and we include that in the case law section. After the case law section is some more logistics things like the timekeeper. They have materials, so it gives you a guideline of what the timekeeper should be doing. There's stop cards, like 1 minute, 2 minute stop, that kind of thing. And then we also include a sample score sheet. So that's a lot, but as I mentioned, the case packet is really large, but please don't be intimidated by it. It's perfectly acceptable and really makes sense to break the case packet down into smaller chunks. And one of our later videos will talk about what's an efficient way to organize and do that. So moving on from the case packet, let's talk about some competition logistics. So the culminating event for high school mock trial, if you choose, you're certainly not required to do this, but we do host a competition. So if you want to work with the case file and you don't have any intentions of doing the competition, totally fine, nothing wrong with that. If your students are like, oh no, we spent all this time working, we want to show off what we know and we want to really present this, we do have a mock trial competition that the students will participate in. And the timeline of this is a little bit different, but it generally follows the same pattern. So the case file is released each year in September. And this is at the Law and Citizenship Conference, but this year that'll look a little bit different. We have a mock trial specific conference, but September is the guideline. So end of September is when the case comes out. And then what you need to know about that is that each school needs 1 case file. So it doesn't matter if you plan to field 3 teams or if you only want 1 team. The case file goes by school, not by team. So all of Buckeye High School, or Trillium is our case file name for a school, that one school only needs to purchase one case file. Going on, the competition is structured in a 3-tiered structure. So the very first one is anybody that wants to participate in the competition that registers will compete at the district level. And that's 2 trials. As we've mentioned in previous videos, there's always going to be both sides of the case presented. So your one team will present both the prosecution and the defense. So the district competition consists of 2 trials, alternating sides. That takes place in January. The date will fluctuate each year just a little bit, so I can't tell you exactly when in January, but know that we announce that and include it in the case file. Then teams that move on from the district competition, so teams that have won both of their trials, will move on to the regional competition, and that will follow a very similar structure in terms of presenting 2 trials. So they'll present both the prosecution and the defense side of a case. That takes place in February. Generally speaking, we try to allow for about 1 month in between, but just keep an eye on our website and in your case file to know the exact dates. But January for districts, February for regionals. And then moving on from there, if your team makes it out of regionals, then they move on to the state competition, and that takes place in March. And that will take place in Columbus. We host the state competition in Columbus, where our organization is based, and that is a 5-trial tier. I won't go into too much detail on what that trial structure looks like because it can be a little bit complicated, but that is explained well and laid out well in the case file. So if you have any questions on the state finals, definitely take a look at the case file because we explain it, and feel free to reach out with any questions. But that's our general structure: is districts in January, regionals in February, states in March. And the way that we have it is teams must be undefeated to advance. There are a few exceptions to that, but again, all of that information is covered in your rules. So your mock trial rules really are your mock trial Bible because it's going to have the answer to most of your questions. So any exceptions to what I mentioned above will be included in the mock trial rules as well. So definitely familiarize yourself with those. Okay, so as I've already alluded to, your competition format is always your team is going to participate in 2 trials, once as the prosecution/plaintiff, once as the defense. We will tell you which side you're going to present first, but you will always present both sides of the case. Timing of the trials will differ by competition site. When we do the district and regionals, we have that throughout multiple counties in Ohio, so we don't have one set time. It's always on the same day, but not always at the same time. So check your mock trial file for that because everything is included in your case packet. Each trial also will have 3 judges. One judge will serve as the presiding judge who oversees the trial and rules on objections and makes decisions during the trial. The other 2 judges are scoring judges who are there just watching the performance and keeping score. All of the judges fill out a score sheet. So even though the presiding judge is the one overseeing objections, they're also evaluating the trial and keeping track on a score sheet. To win the trial, you have to win 2 out of the 3 judge ballots. So it doesn't matter what that combination is. It could be both scoring judges. It could be 1 scoring and the presiding judge, but 2 out of 3 means that your team wins that trial. Judges also, while they're evaluating, they determine a best attorney and best witness during each trial. So how that's calculated is all of the judges add up their scores, and the one attorney who has the highest overall score is your outstanding attorney. And they do the same thing for witnesses. So the one witness with the highest score out of all is the outstanding witness, and the judges present the award during the trial. So points are subjectively used to determine each judge's winner. So I am Judge A, I fill out my form, and I add up both Team A and Team B and see which team on my score sheet has the highest number of points. That team wins my ballot. Points are not used cumulatively. It's really only used subjectively for that one judge. So I've determined based on points the winner of my ballot. My other two judges have determined the winner on their ballot, and whoever has won 2 out of those 3 ballots is the winner of that trial. Again, we do a really good job of explaining that in the case packet and presenting that information, so feel free to run back through your case packet and review that information. And as always, ask me questions if you have them. All right. So admin and form completion, the boring part for you of mock trial, but it's necessary to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row. So in order to participate in the program, you have to complete a couple of forms. The first thing you need to do is complete your materials order form. So that is what is going to secure you that case file that I just talked about. So that case document, whether you have it in hard copy or digital copy, you get that by completing a materials order form. Once you do that, you will register your team. We tend to wait on opening registration until everyone's had a little bit of time to digest. So that won't come at the same time, but team registration is required. And that is per team, not per school. So if you are a school and you have too many students that you can't fit them all on one team, you decide, oh, I think we have enough students that we're going to have 3 separate teams. You have to complete a registration form for each one of those teams. You only have to order 1 case file for your whole school, but you have to do team registration per team. And once you've done your materials order form, your team registration, next up is team roster. Again, that's for each team. And that roster is just a list of students who are participating, so we know who is going to be at the trial. And all of these are done online on our website. We have links to all of these forms, so you don't have to handwrite any of these. And then also in order, these are like the last 2, once it really gets down to the nitty-gritty and you're ready to compete, you have to review what we have as a behavior standards form, which just says, look, we are very lucky to have courtroom space given to us as donation from the local courthouses and the county courthouses. So these are the certain courtroom etiquette or behaviors that we expect all of our program participants to follow. So as the advisor, you have to review that, sign off on it, and agree in order to participate. And then you also need to have students submit a signed photo release form. So that could be, yes, they're allowed to be photographed, or no, they're not allowed to be photographed, but we do need everybody on your team to have that so we know where it's okay to take pictures and that kind of thing. So that's the nitty gritty of it. And again, I send out plenty of emails and all this information is in the case packet. So you don't have to remember all of this now, but I want you to have some context for it when you see it later. And this is just a nice little graphic to sort of show how the process should go in terms of filling out your forms. It's a lot to keep track of, and as if you don't already have enough on your plate, there's a couple more steps. So we just put it into this nice graphic to show you the order in which you should do these things. So ordering your case first, submitting a team registration, team rosters, photo releases, and behavior standards. So handy little graphic to refer back to. And this is one of the last pieces because it's really going to be your center for all updates and all things mock trial related. So this is a screenshot of the high school mock trial website, and it shows you, I have the statewide competition tab circled because that is where competition updates are going to be. So that's things like where your students will compete. Eventually we'll tell you what side they're presenting first, and anything related to the competition will go there. You'll notice to the left of the statewide competition, we have the case file tab, and that's where we'll have the order form for you to order your case. We also have something called errata, which is inevitably we make mistakes and we need to clarify some things in the case. So every 2 weeks we update you on those changes in the form of an errata, all of which is shared on our case file tab. So if you have a question, you couldn't find the answer to it in your case file, definitely check the website because we update this pretty regularly throughout the program season with all of the important information. And the website also has my contact information on it should you forget, so you can find my name, phone number, and email address on the bottom of pretty much every tab on the high school mock trial page. So that is going to be, aside from the case packet, that's going to be your big hub of information is our mock trial website. And lastly, I'm just going to run through a couple of resources that are helpful in continuing throughout the program. So this is a link to the webpage that I just showed you a screenshot of. The OCLRE page, it's simply oclre.org/HSMT. That has a collection of everything I just mentioned. So resources can be found there, updates and tutorial videos. Anytime we put out new resources will also go on that page. Our YouTube channel is a great resource because we have videos that we've accumulated from all of the final rounds. So every state final round that takes place in the Ohio State House, we have archived footage going back to the beginning of the program. So we have plenty of final round videos for you to watch if you want to get a feel for what it looks like. And we also have a mentor hangout video that just is a conversation between an OCLRE staff member and two of the veteran experienced mock trial advisors who had been doing the program for a while, just to answer some questions and go through what mock trial looks like for them. So it's a helpful starting point if you want to get some insight on how other people run the program. And last but certainly not least, OCLRE has 3 educators on staff ready and willing to help. So I myself am a former educator. My colleague Ryan and Kelly are also educators, and we are happy to help in any way that we can. We try to provide resources, but if there's something that we don't already have available that you think would be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out. We are happy to assist in any way that we can. So that concludes our presentation for this section, but please be sure to stay tuned and check back. We have a whole series of introduction to mock trial videos that are helpful in just getting familiar with the program. So we hope to see you at one of our events, and please feel welcome to reach out to me with any questions. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.